Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Osteen, and this is Hong, one of my developers. The other two, John and Lawrence, weren't able to come with us today, but we're going to carry on without them. So this is actually my second time taking this. I'm actually not a journalism student, but I am this team's designer. I'm a computer science student, but I was allowed to take this class again this semester on the design side. Purely out of interest. So our goal this semester was to create a finishable news experience for iOS. And our product is called AEffect. And basically all AEffect does is deliver news based on the emotional value of each article's content. So the user will be able to filter out articles based on the mood or the emotion that was determined for each article. So we actually have a pretty far along build that I'm going to show you now. Great. I'll just use this here. Yeah. All right. So here we have the main feed. When the app first opens up, oh, yeah. There we go. All right, so when the app first opens up, we have the main feed. By default, we are going to load 10 articles. That is the finishable part. But of course, you will be able to request new articles. But there is a default emotion, and we will show you how to select that in a bit. But here we see 10 articles that have been determined to be happy. And this, of course, scrolls here. Now, color is a big part of this app. There are 6 emotions in here, and you just tap this little bubble down here to get your emotions, and you can select them. And of course, the color changes. You have the emotion displayed at the top so that you do actually know what emotion you are viewing. And of course, by selecting a cell, it loads the article's information. Now to request 10 more articles, all you do is a simple pull to refresh. And there you have it. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's a cool little ash symbol that's built there when that happens. Just a nice little Easter egg there. And we really wanted to keep this app simple, but still have a lot of the same basic features that a lot of other newsreader apps had, so we decided to implement a reading list. So these are stories that you want to save for later. Maybe you have already read them and you just want quick access to them later on, or maybe you haven't read them and you want to be able to later on while you're commuting or you have some downtime. So to do that, there are 2 ways. You can slide each cell to add them to the list. And we haven't quite gotten to this part, but there will be 2 little buttons up here in the top right where you can share it to your social media, but also add it to the reading list. So to access the reading list, you simply just tap the reading list button there on the top left, and your reading list pops up. And here are all of your articles that you have saved to your reading list. They are sorted in the same order that you saw in the emotion selection menu by section. Again, color-coded. And this really just works pretty much the same way as our main feed does. Selecting a cell loads the article. And this looks a little bit different, but you will have the same basic options there by sliding the cell. You can also batch delete in edit mode by selecting multiple cells, what have you, and hitting the trash button at the bottom. And that's our reading list. Again, we try to keep this really simple, so we only have 2 settings up here in the top right, which presents a nice little popover with our 2 settings. The default emotion that I mentioned earlier, you just select by tapping this bottom cell here, and it cycles through the 6 basic emotions, and that's pretty much just how we didn't want to confuse people with scrolling again and again through a picker or anything like that. And we also have dark mode. I don't know about any of you, but when I'm sitting at home and it's dark outside and low light inside, I hate all that white space just glaring and burns my eyes. So we wanted to do a simple little dark mode that we are going to be building this week. Pretty proud of my team. We've gotten this far in just about 2 weeks after our designs were finalized. And that is AEffect as of right now. So you might be wondering, how are we actually judging the emotion of each of these articles? Can we go back to? Oh yeah. And we do this by a process in computer science which is called natural language processing. There are a lot of different facets of natural language processing. Some of them you might be familiar with, like summarization, parsing, which just about every application you use probably does some sort of parsing. Speech recognition, so things like Siri or text-to-speech. Named entity recognition, so recognizing the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives in sentences. And sentiment analysis, which is what we touched on here. And a lot of these things are what actually drive IBM's Watson, their famous computer, which you see here. But what we're using here is actually emotional analysis, which is a little bit deeper sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis by itself really focuses on the polarity of a block of text, whether it's opinionated or neutral. But emotional analysis kind of digs a little bit deeper than that polarity and tries to judge the content and provide an emotion for that content. Most of the emotion analysis engines that I came across mapped to about 8 emotions, and those 8 emotions for the most part correlate with Plutchik's wheel of emotions, which you see there on the left. Now, when we were doing our research for this app, a lot of the apps that already are on the market and that are doing success or that are successful seem to be more and more curated. The editors, curate the content for the user for a specific time or for a specific audience. But we really didn't want to have to leave that work to somebody. Being computer science people, we want the easiest, simplest, most consistent results every time. So, we didn't want the biasness of curation, having somebody sit down and have to determine for themselves what each article's emotion is. That takes a lot of time. So while doing research, I came across a company called Kanjoya, and they have a proprietary natural language processing engine that really focuses on the emotional analysis. And I contacted one of their representatives, and they were gracious enough to give us restricted, but still, for our purposes, very helpful access to their natural language processing engine, and we were able to aggregate all of these articles and send them to Kanjoya for analysis and basically retrieve them and put them in our database. We did consolidate those, the 8 emotions that they map to, which are anger, surprise, sadness, joy, fear, excited, happy, and worried, down to 6, which you saw inside the app, which are happy, surprise, sadness, worried, anger, and fear. Of course, this class is only a semester long, so we were kind of pigeonholed into this solution. Of course, if we had the time and the resources and the money, we would have liked to create our own emotional analysis engine. But that is AEffect.
So talk about that a little bit. What would it take, and do we have the expertise, if you had the time or money on this campus, to be able to develop your own engine for ferreting out what kind of content goes with what emotion?
I believe the computer science department actually has a course on natural language processing. I wasn't able to really contact anyone from there. I don't think it was actually taught this semester. I think it's only in the fall. But as far as my research, it is a very dense field. We're basically talking about artificial intelligence and how computers interact with natural language. So it was definitely a hurdle that we couldn't jump this semester. It would probably have taken us the better part of a year and a half just to do the engine for the processing if we did it ourselves. And I have 3 developers, and I'm technically a developer myself, and I'd say it would take us quite a while to do that part.
I'm trying to understand too just how far you've been able to take it in this semester, and I realize that is an impediment. But when you say you send articles to the company and they run them through their engine, is this something that's being done automatically? Is this stuff something that can be done in real time at this point? Or what would it take to get to that point if that's not what you're doing now?
From what the representative at Kanjoya told me, the processing is done in real time. What I've shown you today in the app actually isn't data that has been processed already. It's just data that we put in the database ourselves for testing purposes. We're still waiting to get that data back from Kanjoya, but from what I was told, it's done in real time.
So when you looked at how it was filtering them and assigning some of these stories to different emotional states, did you just eyeballing it say, this seems to be working, that these are stories I would read that have happy content or worried content or whatever? Did it seem to do what it was advertised as doing?
The processing from Kanjoya?
So when you were demoing the app, you had some stories in different categories. Like you showed the happy screen and there were several stories, and we didn't get a chance to really see the individual pieces, but I just wonder if you thought that the process that Kanjoya uses against news stories was in fact matching up happy news, whatever that is, with happy state.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, the content that you see here in the app isn't content that has been processed. They're articles that we have aggregated and sent off to Kanjoya for processing, but they haven't been mapped to an emotion yet. We've basically just put in that data ourselves, kind of randomly, just for testing purposes, since we are kind of on the latter point of our build phase.
Ruben.
I know the answer to this question, but I think other people would be interested. When Kanjoya reports this back to you with the emotional mapping to the content, can you talk about how they score the emotions? Like some stories might ping on multiple emotions, for instance. How does that work in terms of the processing?
So the Kanjoya's processing actually maps to 8 emotions while we're mapping to 6. And of course, some articles might overlap those emotions. You know, something that is marked as happy could also be excited or could also be sad. You know, there is some subjectivity to that. But part of, part of our app will actually account for that. As far as, again, we were told by Kanjoya we don't have the data back just yet, but they mark it on a scale from 0 to 1. So it's like a floating point from 0 to 1. And if there are articles, which I'm assuming there will be, that map across multiple emotions, we plan on presenting those articles in the appropriate emotions. So whether or not it's happy or sad or both, they will appear in both of those selections when you view those emotions.
So I think this is a really interesting exercise, but I'd be curious to see what you think the ultimate sort of outcome would be if you take this, all the way to the end. What's the use case for somebody wanting an app that displays news content that matches a given mood?
That's a great question. So when we were in the initial stages of this course, we were asked to go and interview users and see what their experience was behind consuming news and consuming information. And one of the ones that kind of stuck out and was rather prominent across all of our interviews was that the news was really depressing, or it was really sad, or people tried to avoid the news because it was always negative. There wasn't anything positive. And that's kind of what we played off of. We have to assume that not all news can be happy. So there is of course going to be news that is sad or infuriating or depressing, what have you. So we don't want to just throw all that stuff out and just give people the ability to just say, okay, I only want happy news, or I only want news that's going to excite me or surprise me. So that's kind of what we played off of here, with thanks to actually Titan's suggestion. So.
Any other questions for the AEffect team? One more, Ruben?
Have you guys talked about the back-end data you're going to collect about users using this, and how what they choose might aggregate on the backside?
We haven't. There's a lot of hurdles with just this idea as it stands now. We're actually pulling these articles from the New York Times, RSS feed, and API. So just that in and of itself, is a legal hurdle. But personally, I don't have any interest in collecting that sort of data about users. Just a personal preference, but I definitely see the opportunity to have that sort of data available.
All right, thanks for your presentation. Appreciate it.